May 3, 2021, a quiet spring afternoon in Keystone Heights, Florida. For Eric Paul Akridge, it began like any other day. He had spent the morning tinkering with his car, a pastime he often enjoyed. The 50-year-old mechanic and fisherman was known for his easygoing nature and deep devotion to his family. That morning, Paul visited his parents' home, borrowing their car so he could drive to Palatka to pick up parts he needed. It was a normal errand, simple, routine, and completely ordinary. No one could have predicted that it would be the last time anyone would ever see him. After completing his trip, Paul returned to his sister's house later that afternoon. Surveillance footage captured him at 5:10 p.m., dropping off his parents' vehicle. He was wearing a bucket hat, his face partially covered. His sister, Kalena Julius, found the footage unsettling. "He always looked people in the eye," she later said. "That wasn't like him." The brief recording became the final trace of Paul's movements, a haunting image frozen in time. Moments later, he vanished. In the hours that followed, his family grew uneasy. Paul was a creature of habit, calling his parents and sisters every single day. When his phone went unanswered that evening, his sisters tried not to worry. But as night turned into morning, concern deepened into panic. By the next day, Paul's social media account had gone dark, something his family immediately recognized as a red flag. "He was always active," Kalena recalled. "When his Facebook went offline, I just knew something was wrong." What began as confusion quickly escalated into fear. Calls to local hospitals and jails turned up nothing. Paul's friends hadn't seen him. His car was accounted for, but he was nowhere to be found. By May 5th, 2 days after his last sighting, the family filed an official missing person report with the Clay County Sheriff's Office. Deputies began a search, interviewing relatives, canvassing the neighborhood, and reviewing surveillance footage from nearby homes and businesses. As the investigation unfolded, an eerie piece of information surfaced. A phone call Paul had made to his sister, Selena, just 3 days before his disappearance. His words were chilling. "They're going to get me," he said. "When they do, you won't have me anymore." When she pressed for details, asking who they were, Paul hesitated. "I can't tell you," he said. "They have more money and resources than the police." It was the kind of statement that lingered in the air, heavy with fear and confusion. For Selena, that call would replay endlessly in her mind. At the time, she thought he might be paranoid or distressed. But after his disappearance, it became impossible to ignore. His words felt prophetic, a warning she couldn't interpret until it was too late. Within a week, flyers bearing Paul's face appeared around Keystone Heights. Local media picked up the story. Family and friends organized search parties, combing wooded areas and rural roads, hoping for any sign of him. Deputies checked ponds, fishing spots, and abandoned properties. But each lead dissolved into another dead end. The disappearance of Eric Paul Akridge was both baffling and devastating. There was no crime scene, no body, no evidence of a struggle. He had simply disappeared between one familiar driveway and the next. For the Akridge family, that uncertainty became its own kind of torment. As his sister Mary put it, "You think you'll find something, a clue, a trace, anything. But when there's nothing, you just sit there wondering if he's out there somewhere, waiting for you to find him." Long before his disappearance, Eric Paul Akridge was known throughout Keystone Heights as a man everyone admired. Born and raised in the small Florida town, Paul was the only son among 4 children. The brother his 3 sisters adored, and the pride of his parents, Denise, and her late husband. His younger sister, Selena Julius, often described their childhood as inseparable. "We were only 15 months apart," she said. "It felt like we were twins. Wherever he went, I followed." That bond would remain strong throughout their lives and would later drive her relentless search for answers after he went missing. Sports were a defining part of Paul's youth. From an early age, his natural athletic ability set him apart. In school, he was the kind of player coaches remembered years later. Disciplined, fast, and fiercely competitive. He excelled in baseball, basketball, and even football, but it was baseball that captured his heart. On the diamond, he found both purpose and peace. He was a gifted shortstop and pitcher, earning Most Valuable Player awards during his high school years. "He had the kind of arm you couldn't teach," recalled one of his old teammates. "He made it look effortless." After graduating in 1988, Paul continued chasing his baseball dreams at Santa Fe Community College. His performance earned him respect, and for 2 years he thrived in the competitive world of college sports. Eventually, he transferred to the University of Florida, hoping to elevate his career. But the transition proved difficult. Instead of the starting positions he was used to, he became a relief pitcher, spending more time on the bench than on the field. Though disappointed, Paul refused to give up. His determination led him to transfer again, this time to Warner Southern, where he finished his college career with renewed drive. Beyond athletics, Paul's greatest source of happiness came from family. The Akridges were a close-knit, faith-centered household that valued loyalty and time together. Family was everything to him, said his sister Valerie. He never missed a birthday, never missed a holiday. He was always around. Their father, a man who loved the outdoors, often took Paul fishing in nearby lakes and rivers. It became their shared passion. Whether standing on the banks of Santa Fe Lake or out on a small aluminum boat, those quiet moments became some of the most cherished memories of Paul's youth. Our dad loved fishing, Valerie said softly, and Paul was always right there beside him. That love for fishing continued into adulthood. Paul became a regular competitor in local fishing tournaments, often at Santa Fe Lake in Gainesville. Every Wednesday evening, he joined other anglers in friendly competition. His sisters remembered his excitement whenever he reeled in the biggest catch of the night. "He'd send us photos," Selena said, laughing through tears. He was always proud, and we were always proud of him. Outside of sports and family, Paul was known for his kindness and willingness to help anyone.
He couldn't say no, his sister Mary explained.
If you needed a hand fixing something, he'd drop everything to help. Friends described him as humble, compassionate, and quick to smile. He was the kind of person people remembered, the kind of neighbor everyone trusted. It was this warmth and generosity that made his disappearance so painful to understand. For those who knew Paul best, the man they loved had always been grounded by family and guided by a good heart. Losing him wasn't just losing a brother or a son, it was losing the center of who they were. As Paul entered his 30s, the path that once seemed clear began to shift. After years of playing and coaching baseball, reality set in. A professional sports career was slipping out of reach. Still, Paul tried to make the best of it. He took jobs here and there, mostly working in construction and landscaping, occasionally returning to the ball field to coach local kids. But those who knew him noticed that beneath the surface, something had changed. According to his sister Selena, Paul began to struggle with a growing sense of disappointment. He had so much potential, she said. When things didn't go the way he hoped, it really weighed on him. The dreams he had chased since childhood, the roar of the crowd, the promise of a baseball career, had faded. What replaced them was a quiet frustration that Paul rarely voiced but often carried in his demeanor. By the early 2000s, those frustrations took a darker turn. Like many small-town athletes who found their dreams slipping away, Paul began experimenting with drugs. At first it was casual, something he brushed off as harmless recreation. But over time, casual use became dependency. His family began to worry when he started to isolate himself and drift away from his once active life. Addiction changes people, Valerie said softly. And it changed Paul, but even then his heart never changed. He still loved us. He just got lost. His struggles with substance use led to several run-ins with the law, including minor arrests and short jail stays. But despite his setbacks, Paul was never violent. Everyone agreed. He wasn't a threat to anyone but himself. He was gentle, said Selena. He'd rather walk away from a fight than start one. In 2013, Paul's life seemed to hit a turning point. He moved back to Keystone Heights, closer to his family. His mother, Denise, hoped that being home would give him stability, a chance to rebuild. She never lost faith in her son. She believed in him completely, said Valerie. She always said, "He's my boy. He just needs a chance." For a while, things seemed to improve. Paul picked up steady work doing odd jobs, reconnected with old friends, and began spending more time fishing again. His family recalls that spark returning, the same warmth and humor they'd missed. He was doing better, Selena said. We could see it, but the fight against addiction is rarely straightforward. In the following years, Paul's progress fluctuated. He would stay sober for months, then relapse under stress or loneliness. Despite these struggles, he never gave up entirely. He kept trying, always calling his sisters, checking in and reminding them that he loved them. 2023, a period that would become crucial in understanding what led to Paul's disappearance. Around this time, he started reconnecting with an old circle of friends, some of whom were still involved in drugs. He also began dating someone new, though details of that relationship remain unclear. His family noticed he seemed distracted, more anxious than usual. Selena recalled one phone call that haunted her later. He said something like, "If anything ever happens to me, remember I love you." At the time, I laughed it off. Now I wish I hadn't. By December, Paul's behavior grew more unpredictable. He sometimes disappeared for days, then suddenly returned home as if nothing had happened. Still, his family held on to hope. "We'd been through this before," Valerie said. "We thought he'd pull through again." He always did. But in January 2024, just weeks before his disappearance, Paul's life would take a final, tragic turn, one that no one in the Akridge family could have imagined. Monday, May 3rd, 2021, began like any other day in the quiet town of Keystone Heights, Florida. For the Akridge family, it was just another spring afternoon, sunny, warm, and uneventful. But by nightfall, that ordinary day would turn into a nightmare that would haunt them for years. Paul had spent the morning tinkering with his car in the driveway. He was always known for being handy. Whether it was fixing engines or patching roofs, Paul could do it all. That day he mentioned needing a few parts and planned to make a trip to Palatka, a nearby city about 40 minutes away. Before leaving, he stopped by his parents' home to borrow their car, a silver sedan he often used for errands. His father, who had always been close to him, handed him the keys without hesitation. He said he'd be back before dinner, his mother, Denise, later recalled. He never came back. At around 3 p.m., Paul arrived in Palatka to pick up the parts he needed. Receipts and surveillance footage from the auto shop confirmed his visit. Employees said he was polite and calm, nothing unusual about his behavior. After completing his purchase, Paul drove back toward Keystone Heights. It was a routine trip, one he'd made countless times before. When he returned, Paul stopped at his sister Selena's house to drop off his parents' car. Surveillance cameras from her property show him arriving at approximately 5:10 p.m. In the footage, Paul can be seen wearing a light shirt, jeans, and a bucket hat that partially covered his face. He parks the car, steps out, looks around briefly, and then walks out of frame. That was the last confirmed sighting of him. At first, nothing seemed out of place. Selena assumed he had gotten a ride home or walked to meet someone nearby. It wasn't until the following morning that worry began to set in. Paul hadn't called. He hadn't texted. And his phone, usually glued to his side, went straight to voicemail. "He called me every single day," Selena said. "Sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. When I didn't hear from him, I knew something was wrong." The next day, his sisters began reaching out to friends, hospitals, and local jails, anywhere he might have been. But there was no trace. His Facebook profile, which he used often, went silent. His phone remained off. By the 3rd day, panic spread through the family. Denise filed a missing person report with the Clay County Sheriff's Office. Investigators started by retracing Paul's last known movements. They spoke with the employees from the auto shop and reviewed the surveillance footage from Selena's home. While the video showed him leaving the car, it provided few clues about where he went next or who he met. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence that anything violent had happened there. But detectives couldn't ignore the strange detail that his face was covered by a hat. It wasn't like him to hide his face, Kalina said. He wasn't that kind of person. It looked like he didn't want to be recognized. That detail, coupled with the cryptic warning Paul had given his sister 3 days before, "They're going to get me," began to raise troubling questions. Who were they? Was he running from someone? Did he owe money, or had he gotten mixed up with the wrong people again? As investigators dug deeper, they discovered that Paul's car parts were still in the borrowed vehicle, untouched. His wallet and phone were missing, but there were no financial transactions or pings after May 3rd. It was as if Paul had simply vanished. For his family, each passing hour without answers felt unbearable. "That night I sat by the window waiting for his call," Denise said softly. The phone never rang. By the end of that week, hope began to give way to dread. The man who had always called home, the son who never missed a birthday, the brother who checked in every day and was gone, and deep down, his family feared that Paul's chilling words had come true. Once Paul Akridge was officially declared missing, the Clay County Sheriff's Office began a comprehensive investigation into his disappearance. Detectives started with the most basic question: where was Paul last seen and who saw him after 5:10 p.m. on May 3, 2021? The surveillance footage from Selena's house showed him dropping off his parents' car and then walking out of view, but no one could confirm where he went next. It was as though he had vanished into thin air. Investigators canvassed the area surrounding Selena's property, searching nearby woods, roads, and small lakes that dotted the Keystone Heights region. Deputies conducted drone sweeps and ground searches but found nothing. No discarded items, no footprints, no trace of Paul. It quickly became clear that this was not a typical missing person case. Detectives had no evidence of foul play, yet no indication that Paul had left voluntarily either. The sheriff's office also reviewed Paul's phone and bank activity. His cell phone had gone offline shortly after the time he was last seen. No text messages, no social media logins, and no financial transactions occurred after that moment. To investigators, it appeared as though someone had deliberately cut off all means of communication, or that something had happened to Paul preventing him from using his phone at all. Detectives interviewed his close family and friends, including his 3 sisters and mother, who all insisted that Paul would never disappear on his own. "He loved his family too much," Denise told officers. "He wouldn't just leave without calling me." The interviews also revealed the troubling phone call Paul made to Selena 3 days before his disappearance, in which he said, "They're going to get me." Investigators found the statement disturbing but frustratingly vague. Paul had not mentioned who they were, leaving detectives to wonder if he was paranoid or if he had been genuinely in danger. In an effort to trace his final movements, investigators re-examined the timeline leading up to May 3rd. Witnesses from the auto shop confirmed he seemed normal and calm earlier that day. His neighbors in Keystone Heights, however, recalled seeing an unfamiliar vehicle parked near Selena's house around the time Paul dropped off his parents' car. One neighbor described it as a dark-colored truck with tinted windows. Unfortunately, the description was too vague to yield concrete leads. The sheriff's office enlisted the help of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE, to perform forensic analysis on Paul's belongings in the car he returned. Forensics found no evidence of blood, fingerprints from other individuals, or signs of a struggle. This deepened the mystery further. It was as if Paul had stepped into the woods and simply never returned. Detectives also investigated Paul's personal history, particularly his past struggles with drug use. Some theorized that his disappearance might have been linked to an old debt or a conflict with individuals involved in the drug trade, yet even that angle led to dead ends. None of his acquaintances reported recent trouble, and no one had seen him meeting suspicious people in the days before he vanished. As months passed with no new leads, frustration and heartache grew within the Akridge family. They began organizing their own searches, handing out flyers and creating social media pages to raise awareness. "Someone knows something," Kalena said during a televised interview. "My brother didn't just disappear. Somebody out there has to know where he is." Despite extensive efforts by both family and law enforcement, the case went cold. There was no sign of Paul's body, no confirmed sightings, and no credible tips that brought them closer to the truth. For investigators, each unanswered question led to another, and for Paul's family, every silent day without news was a reminder that time was slowly erasing hope. In the months following Paul's disappearance, the Akridge family refused to give up. Every morning began the same way, checking the phone, scrolling through social media, and hoping for a message, a clue, anything that could point to where Paul might be. His sisters, Selena, Mary, and Valerie, organized search parties with local volunteers, walking miles through wooded areas, fishing spots, and abandoned lots. "We searched every inch of Keystone Heights," Selena said. "Every path, every lake, every roadside ditch. But there was nothing." The Clay County Sheriff's Office remained involved, but as time passed and evidence grew cold, progress stalled. Detectives kept the case open, yet new leads were few. Each report, each possible sighting turned out to be a false alarm. Still, Paul's family continued their own investigation, relying on social media and community support to keep his name alive. They set up a Facebook page titled "Help Find Eric Paul Akridge," where they posted updates, memories, and appeals for information. Thousands followed the page, sharing it across Florida and beyond. The internet became our lifeline, Mary explained. It's what kept his name from disappearing. His mother, Denise, spent many nights staring out the window, waiting for headlights to appear in the driveway. I always think he's going to come home, she said softly. It's a mother's instinct. You never stop waiting for your child. As the weeks turned into months, the family began organizing awareness events in Paul's honor. Candlelight vigils were held near Santa Fe Lake, one of his favorite fishing spots. Dozens of people gathered with candles and photos, sharing stories about the man they loved. He wasn't just a missing person on a flyer, Valerie said tearfully during one vigil. He was our brother, our best friend, and the heart of this family. Selena took on the role of the family's spokesperson, determined to keep the case active. She contacted journalists, spoke with missing persons organizations, and even reached out to private investigators. One investigator, after reviewing Paul's case, concluded that while foul play couldn't be proven, the possibility couldn't be ruled out either. It's hard to believe someone can just disappear without leaving a single trace, he said. Cases like Paul's usually involve more than just coincidence. The family also contacted Project Cold Case, a Jacksonville-based nonprofit that partners with the University of North Florida to bring attention to unsolved cases. Through the project, Paul's story was featured online, giving it renewed exposure. That article gave us a voice, Selena said. It reminded people that Paul mattered, that he's not just another statistic. Despite the community's support, the emotional toll was immense. Denise often spoke about the quiet that had settled in their home since Paul's disappearance. He used to call every day, sometimes just to ask what we were eating, she said. Now the phone is silent. Each holiday, birthday, and family gathering served as a painful reminder of his absence. His sisters would set a plate for him at the table, hoping somehow he'd walk through the door. By the first anniversary of his disappearance, frustration mixed with exhaustion. Yet their determination did not waver. We won't stop until we find out what happened, Selena told local reporters. Even if it takes the rest of our lives, the family's hope, though tested, never completely faded. Every anonymous tip, every phone call from a stranger brought renewed energy to their search. All we need is one piece of truth, Mary said. One person brave enough to speak up. 4 years later, they are still waiting. But as Selena often says, as long as we keep searching, Paul isn't forgotten. And until we find him, we'll keep the light on for him, just like he'd do for us. As the years passed without answers, the Akridge family's lives became defined by absence. Every conversation, every memory circled back to one question. What happened to Paul? The uncertainty was unbearable. For his mother, Denise, hope and grief existed side by side. Some nights I convince myself he's still out there, she said quietly. Other nights I wake up crying because deep down I know something terrible happened. The family's home became a shrine of sorts. Photos of Paul lined the walls. Him as a young baseball player proudly wearing his high school uniform. Him fishing with his father by Santa Fe Lake. Him smiling at a family barbecue. Each image was a reminder of the life that had once been so full of laughter and connection. He was the center of everything, Valerie said. Our brother, our protector, our best friend. Paul's absence didn't just create emotional pain. It changed the entire rhythm of their lives. Denise found herself unable to sleep through the night, often sitting by the window for hours, waiting for headlights that never came. Selena developed anxiety that worsened over time, replaying the last conversation she had with her brother, the chilling warning that they were going to get him. She couldn't shake the guilt that maybe she should have done more to protect him. If only I had pushed harder, called the police sooner, she often told herself. Maybe things would have been different. For Paul's sisters, the silence was suffocating. Every family event felt incomplete. Birthdays, holidays, even small get-togethers carried a heavy emptiness. They stopped hosting celebrations for a while because the grief was too hard to hide. It's like there's a missing chair at the table that no one can fill, Mary explained. We try to laugh and carry on, but it's always there, that emptiness. Their father took Paul's disappearance the hardest. The two had shared an unbreakable bond built over years of fishing trips, long talks, and quiet understanding. After Paul vanished, his father began to spend most of his days by the front window watching the driveway.
He kept saying Paul was coming home, Denise recalled.
Every morning he'd pour 2 cups of coffee, one for himself and one for Paul. The waiting became part of his daily routine, a ritual of hope that grew heavier with each passing year. As the seasons changed and no word came, his health began to decline. Family members noticed the light fading from his eyes as though the uncertainty was consuming him from within. Then 1 year after Paul's disappearance, tragedy struck again. The day after what would have been Paul's 51st birthday, his father passed away in his sleep. The family believes he died of a broken heart. He couldn't handle not knowing, Denise said through tears. He waited for Paul every day until his last breath. Losing both her husband and her son, Denise felt the world closing in. When your child disappears, there's no closure, no peace, she said. You live in a constant state of waiting. Her daughters rallied around her, determined to keep their mother strong, even when their own hearts were breaking. Together they turned their pain into purpose, continuing to share Paul's story, pleading for anyone with information to come forward. For the Akridges, the pain never dulled, but neither did their love. The loss bound them together in ways they never expected. We've learned to survive, Selena said, but we'll never stop missing him. 4 years have passed, yet every sunset, every phone ring still brings a moment of pause, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, it's Paul coming home. 4 years have passed since the day Paul Akridge vanished, yet his family's search for truth continues with the same determination that began in May 2021. What started as a desperate search for a missing loved one has evolved into a lifelong mission, a mission for answers, accountability, and justice. For the Akridge family, Paul's legacy is not defined by his disappearance, but by the love, laughter, and kindness he shared during his life. Paul was the kind of person who would give you the shirt off his back, Selena said in a recent interview. He never turned anyone away. Even when he was struggling, he helped others. His compassion left a lasting mark on everyone who knew him. Friends still talk about how Paul could light up any room with his smile, how he'd go out of his way to help a stranger fix a car, or offer advice to a friend in trouble. That same generous spirit is what keeps his family pushing forward. In Keystone Heights, Paul's story remains deeply rooted in the community's memory. Residents still remember the flyers posted on telephone poles, the vigils held by candlelight, and the waves of volunteers who came together in the early days of his disappearance. It showed how much he was loved, Mary said. Even people who didn't know Paul joined the search. That's the kind of impact he had. The Akridges continue to work closely with Project Cold Case, keeping Paul's name active in media coverage and missing persons databases. They believe public awareness is the key to breaking the silence that has surrounded the case for so long. Someone out there knows what happened, Valerie said. Maybe they've been afraid to come forward. But after all these years, it's time for the truth. The family's persistence has inspired others facing similar pain. Denise often speaks with families of the missing, offering comfort and advice on how to cope with the uncertainty. You never stop hurting, she told one grieving mother, but you can turn that pain into purpose. You can keep their memory alive. Through her resilience, Denise has become an unexpected advocate for families searching for closure. To honor Paul's memory, the Akridge family established the Light for Paul Foundation, a small community effort dedicated to supporting searches for missing adults in Florida. The foundation helps distribute flyers, connect families with investigators, and raise awareness through social media. It's our way of keeping Paul's light shining, Selena explained. Even if we never get the answers we want, we'll make sure his story helps someone else find theirs. Despite their efforts, the lack of resolution remains a constant wound. Investigators still classify Paul's case as an open missing person investigation, though no new leads have surfaced in years. The family continues to push for renewed attention, hoping advancements in technology, or even a single witness coming forward, could finally bring them closure. We've learned that silence doesn't mean the story is over, Denise said. It just means we haven't reached the truth yet. The Akridges gather every year on May 3rd to honor Paul's life. They light candles, share stories, and release lanterns into the night sky over Santa Fe Lake, the same lake where Paul once spent countless evenings fishing with his father. As the glowing lights drift across the water, Denise whispers the same words each year. We love you. Paul, we're still waiting. Paul's story is one of love, loss, and unwavering faith. a reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, hope can endure. His family refuses to let his name fade into silence. Until we know what happened, Selena said firmly, we'll keep fighting. For Paul, for truth, for peace.